I know we've only been married 12 years and our oldest child is, I guess, almost 12. But do you ever think about like what it would be like to be a grandparent or that type of thing?
I think about it all the time. Ryan, I mean, we talk all the time. When we're grandparents, we want to do this. When we're grandparents, we want to be like this. And I think as we watch our kids experience, life with their grandparents, it is a beautiful thing. Being a grandparent is so different from being a parent. I think it might be more fun. You get to give kids candy and then just say, peace.
Yeah, we've been blessed to be situated where our home is, that we're right near Mary-Rose's mother and right near my parents, and also my grandmother who's still alive. And there are some beautiful moments where, you see grandkids with, their grandparents and great-grandparents and those types of things. But it is a gift, and it's something I will reflect on. What is the role of grandparents? It seems to be a unique gift to family that is just oftentimes overlooked.
And Pope Francis has just said some beautiful things about grandparents, the treasure that they are, the treasure that they sort of bestow on the next generation. And, growing up, I didn't really have much experience of grandparents. I only had one left that was alive, and she lived far away. And so I never really had that experience. But I know for our kids, every chance that they get to be with their grandparents, we want them to be with their grandparents. Maybe you're a grandparent and you don't live near your grandkids. Visit all the time, call, FaceTime, send them letters. They will treasure those letters. So many kids today don't send letters, but I know we really encourage our kids. They will even write letters and notes to their grandparents and ride down the road on their bike and put it in the mailbox because they want to give it to their grandparents.
And we know everyone has a different experience or expectation when it comes to how grandparents work out, particularly in the way we live today, which is sometimes disconnected from extended family. But for whatever your situation is, we would like to kind of put forward for you these 4 great models of what family life is like today in relation to grandparents. So stay with us and you will see them shortly.
Pope Francis refers to grandparents as really like the treasures of really the domestic church, that they hand on really the treasures, the customs, the love of Jesus, the love of the spouse. Like they have so much wisdom and so many treasures to share with not just their kids, but even especially their grandkids.
I think it's very important that they know that they're not just a little isolated a human being that just happens to have parents, and that's where their connection to the rest of the world ends. They're a legacy.
They've fought the fight, they've ran the race, and they're getting to the end. And just they have such a great inheritance to share, such great wisdom, so much love even that's different.
That it's very godly. Legacy, heritage, family connection can't be forgotten about,
It's amazing. I don't know how, you could live without having some people to just support you.
The joy of growing older is being needed by your children and your grandchildren.
Helping them to carry on traditions and to be able to teach things that I learned growing up. That brings me a lot of joy.
A topic that is probably not covered as much sometimes, but is definitely really important to us, is grandparents. We live which is kind of nice near our children's grandparents, our parents, and even my grandmother's nearby, and so it's an important part. But I think today sometimes because of the way people maybe live a little bit disconnected, they miss that opportunity. But can you speak to that from your own example? How have you seen the gift of having grandparents be a part of your domestic church and your family and your life?
To me, one thing that was very impacted me a lot was the love that my grandfather had for my grandmother. They actually lived across the streets from our house, and so we would go visit them every day. We'd play cards every afternoon with them. My grandfather, he liked to write poems, and one poem that really touched me was one of him stating the kind of love he had for her. And in the poem, he said that he needs to ask God for forgiveness. The poem was called Confession, as if he was making a confession to God. I'm sorry because I sometimes feel that I love her more than I love you. Confessing to God, loving his wife more than him. And I thought that was so beautiful. And till his death, Ramonita was the love of Enrique. And it was a palpable sign of the reality of a faithful, long, life-lasting marriage to me.
I've seen that actually with my own parents. It seems like my dad likes to share, giving us like the gifts with my mom. Like for Christmas, he wants her to open his Christmas gift in front of all his children and grandchildren, and he wants us to really see. That I probably don't acknowledge that enough, but it's something that I definitely have noticed, him opening the door for her. And maybe sometimes when maybe they have a little bit more flexibility to do some of those things, but it's good to see. It's definitely an important part of what family is.
And grandparents, just Pope Francis refers to grandparents as really like the treasures of really the domestic church, that they hand on really the treasures, the customs, the love of Jesus, the love of the spouse. Like they have so much wisdom and so many treasures to share with not just their kids, but even especially their grandkids. And a lot of grandparents have shared with us that, while they were young parents, they were still learning. Maybe they didn't practice their faith the way they wanted to, or maybe there were just some struggles in their marriage that maybe they didn't really handle well, and that maybe turned their kids off to the faith. But now that they're grandparents and they've grown together and grown closer to Christ, and they want to make sure that their grandchildren have this witness and that they can pass this on. But some grandkids aren't really able to receive that witness because they're so just immersed in media and busy lives and all that. So that I love what the story you shared about your grandparents, just going over there to play cards, like to play games with grandparents and to be around them with their spouse is so powerful.
A challenge that our culture has, and we talked about it earlier about how easily we move from one place to another, and though oftentimes the relationship that go down the drain because of those movements are grandparents first, and I experienced that brokenness in a sense because I moved from Puerto Rico and I got married here. My children, even though my mom was living in Houston, we tried so hard to just every chance we had to make sure that the kids went and visit grandma and connected them through telephone. And I'm constantly telling them stories about what they lived and the experiences they had, because I think it's very important that they know that they're not just a little isolated human being that just happens to have parents, and that's where their connection to the rest of the world ends. They're a legacy.
Yeah, those are the words that came to my mind too. That it's very godly. Legacy, heritage, family connection can't be forgotten about,
It's very scriptural. It's very biblical.
Very, yeah, very.
watching my parents become grandparents has just been amazing. It's so funny to just see how, they're one way as your parents, and then it just totally changes when there's grandchildren. I'm sure everyone knows this, if you've seen that happen. I'm just so happy that, they have grandparents in their life to be another beautiful example to them. My mom and dad are amazing, and they have so much to offer, and just they have more experience. Just like them, my children, seeing how amazing, their grandparents are, just gives them another example of what to do, how to live, good decisions to make. And Matt's grandparents are amazing also, and his parents.
Yeah, I think like my grandparents, they've just given me a great inheritance, and that's the best way to think of it, is that like your parents, they've lived a while, they're trying to figure it out and go through the motions. And I mean, as new parents, we know we don't have everything together. It's when you think about it, like no one has it together, but the grandparents, they've lived a little bit more, they have more experience, and it's almost like they've fought the fight, they've ran the race, and they're getting to the end. And just, they have such a great inheritance to share, such great wisdom, so much love even, that's different, and just so much. They give it so freely and so easily, and it's such a great gift. They give more than anything I could imagine, and it's surprising me even more seeing them now as great-grandparents.
It's a beautiful kind of testimony. I know every family is different. We've had experience with our parents becoming grandparents and great-grandparents and those types of things. And sometimes it's a gift, and sometimes you're like, is that how I would respond? But it's just a part of this really amazing tapestry. Somehow God, I think, really wants could want our children to be a part of. And for those families who maybe don't live by their parents, or for the children and grandparents, what would you recommend to them?
Finding a way at least to stay in touch with them, visiting if you can, or finding other people in your area that kind of would emulate the same traits as your family would. That way they have that to look to. Your children have that to look to, and you also have those people to lean on, because it's hard to not have help. Like just knowing, like being a young mother, like my mom comes 3 days a week right now to watch my little girl, and it's amazing. I don't know how, you could live without having some people to just support you.
Just being open to them, because I know most grandparents out there, they want to be involved, and that's just such a strong yearning. I'm realizing as a parent, it's super strong to want to be involved. I can only imagine your child's child, how much you want that. And I know sometimes there's situations where you need to remove yourself from the situation, and I think Tori gave something beautiful. Try and find that in the community. The church is a community, and we're all here for each other, and you can find that there. You can find it in the church.
You have 7 children and 10 grandchildren.
7 children and 10 grandchildren, and our oldest grandchildren are the same age as our 2 youngest children. Wow. So it's just been a continual ride. And a lot of people would say, well, you never got out of it. That's why you can just continue to keep going. But really, I find the temptation more, I'm tired. I don't want to do little kid things anymore. I want to move on. What I realize is that the joy of growing older is being needed by your children and your grandchildren. Without having those personal relationships of family like I used to have, raising children would just seem so empty, even though I have many, many hobbies and lots of things I've put on hold that I really want to do. This is the greatest joy, and in giving of yourself to others. And I make a conscious effort to do it. It doesn't come as an easy decision for me. I try to, now I only have a few of my grandchildren that live nearby me, but I try to make it a weekly thing where I show up when my daughters go into adoration, for instance, and I show up just to spend a little time with the kids while she can go to adoration. With my other grandchildren that live further away, I'll go babysit for the weekend for them to have some time away. Those kinds of things. Love my children and love my grandchildren at the same time.
For me, growing up on a farm, and we still have the farm, and we still do things out there, and we have cattle. And for me, just sharing that with my grandkids, my kids along with my grandkids, and they get so much joy out of that. They love to go to the farm. They love to do things with the horses and the cattle. So I just feel like I'm carrying on, helping them to carry on traditions and to be able to teach things that I learned growing up on a farm. So that brings me a lot of joy.
If I could dig in a little bit deeper in this, something you're saying is really, to me, just kind of opening some other thoughts. Like, how do you connect as a grandparent with grandchildren? How is there a mutual, like, them appreciating and actually wanting to spend time with you? Because Cindy, you said a word, I don't know if it was in passing or you intentionally chose it, but you said the word need. Like you said that you respond because you sense that your children need you, your grandparents, and I think we don't hear that too much anymore, but I think that's an honest kind of assessment. But those are kind of coming in play. There's a need, but there's also like a desire.
Like, what do grandchildren need, and how do you respond to that need?
I think I said the word need in response to what people need as they grow older. We need to be needed. Always. And seeing my grandchildren and what they need, I think the same thing is there, that everybody needs to know that they are loved and accepted and included and cherished. And so each child is individual in the way that they need that. Some of my grandchildren love to read. I love to read books out loud. So those are easy for me to do. Other ones like to go jump on the trampoline or play sports outside. And so I try to do those things too.
And a grandparent role, I mean, we know that, like with our children, and they're focused on raising their kids, and they're responsible, but when we're all together with our grandkids, we can just kind of just have fun, and teach and not be concerned about the things that the parents are concerned about.
Like disciplining them so much.
Right. Yeah. We leave the discipline to our kids to discipline our grandkids, to a certain extent. We don't want
You're not
serious
pushovers.
Yeah.
Right. But it opens wide the door for us to lavish love upon them.
Right.
There's a little joke that says that grandparents are raising their grandchildren, and that's the happiest thing in their life. They can take the grandkids when they want and then send them back to mom and dad after having spoiled them. That's not the whole picture. It's certainly when you speak to grandparents, they are so overjoyed with their grandchildren. And I think it's part of that progeny and heritage to be able to have raised children who are now raising children. So it gives a great deal of esteem and confidence to the grandparents. But the grandparents have such a tremendous role to play in a marriage. Speaking to my grandpa in my younger life, I learned so much because he was around a lot. I spent a lot of time with him. I learned how to work. I learned wisdom. And it's said that, we are able to stand on the shoulders of giants. And the thing is, the Bible is full in the book of wisdom and Proverbs about respecting the elders and learning from their wisdom, that they went through struggles in society. They stayed married for 70-something years. They went through a lot of financial difficulties, misunderstandings, and they weathered the storm. And so they've seen things come and they've seen them go. And this is wisdom. So to spend time and listen to our grandparents and to get them involved in assisting in raising a family is a tremendous. Grandparents like it, the grandkids like it, and mom and dad surely appreciate it instead of having just daycare service, but having grandparents involved. And this is another thing I find as a priest, it's been very, very salvific, is that we had done a poor job in catechesis of our young people who are now my age, have raised a family. It's the grandparents who brought the faith to them. So often, seminarians that I dealt with in the seminary told me their grandparents gave them the faith. My mother told me it was her grandpa who imparted the faith and was such an example to her. One of the most powerful impacts in my vocation was my grandfather and what he did for me in passing on the faith. And so grandparents are sometimes raising grandchildren because families are breaking up. But the salvific, this is how God draws straight with crooked lines. The grandparents have from a different generation, experience of tradition in the faith. And so they're teaching our kids how to pray. They're taking them to mass on weekends when maybe sometimes parents don't. They're teaching them about chastity. I remember walking in on a conversation with my little sister, but grandma was talking to her about chastity. And so I backed up there because I knew it was something that was very special and intimate. But how beautiful that she would speak to her about chastity and these things that reinforce what mom and dad are doing at home. So we need our grandparents, and we need to have them to have that joy of seeing children raised and bringing forth the church.
I love this topic that we discussed concerning grandparents. It was something that was so unique and particular to each of the couples who shared their testimony. Did you agree?
And it was beautiful, and it was different, not just from the perspective of being a grandparent, but also the perspective of being a grandchild, really, and to look at, what do you want to receive from a grandparent? And I think really for us, our children, seeing them interact with their grandparents, and then us talking about what kind of grandparents do we want to be? It's really opened our eyes to just a beautiful way of looking at the future, looking back. It's really surreal to think of, our children having children, even though right now they're all very young. But what kind of grandparents do we want to be? I think helps us better understand what kind of parents we want to be, what kind of relationship we want our children's grandparents to have with them. It's such a rich opportunity for so many just traditions and the love that these children need. And if you don't have a grandparent, or if you're not a grandparent, there are, again, so many opportunities for either to find someone who can fill that grandparent role, or if you know children who don't have grandparents, to fill that role for them.
This was a surprising topic for me, particularly because it showed me so many differences on how you can be a grandparent. And I think what really struck me in sort of a concluding way is that there's a vision that I think God somehow implants in our hearts of what we would like the next generation to look like, and what we would like in some ways to contribute. So if you're the grandparent age or getting up there at some point, just ask God, what can I do just to serve? And if you're at that age of being a grandparent, I hope these stories will inspire you to do something amazing.
My life is a miracle. Every child has a story of God's love to share. Shalom World, tune into God's love story.